11th lit, going over vocabulary, and the word is consanguinity. Yeah, you're related by blood. Is there any other definition anybody has? That was it. What'd you have, Ben?
Being descended from some ancestor.
Right. Anyway, I think it can also mean a deep friendship, a deep connection, other than just blood. You know, that's literally what it means. Do you have a sentence?
Yeah, the marriage was annulled on grounds of consanguinity.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. Yes. Penury. Yeah, tell me about it.
Relating to or consisting of money.
What?
From money.
Yeah, but what about money? Anybody get a different one? Well, I thought penury, and I could be wrong. I thought it was the being miserly or poor. Does it? I guess I need to double check that. Because I think it's more than just money. I will double check it. How did you use it?
I'll go with yours. The peasants were pecuniary.
Penurious. Okay. We'll come back to that one. How about the next one?
Is it wait, no. Yeah, that's right?
Mine are in a little different order.
Rejection of a proposal or idea.
What's the word again?
Repudiation.
Repudiation.
Oh.
Yeah, when you repudiate something, you reject it. Good.
The oh gosh, well, how do you say it again?
Repudiation or repudiate.
The repudiation of reformist policies I disagree with.
Yeah, that even sounds important, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't you know there's certain words that if you hear somebody say it, wow, it's really smart. I mean, repudiation. We'll go to Sarah.
Is it class? Is that how you say it?
A class. Yeah.
So I said brilliant display or text, and the person showed plate in their athletic abilities.
In what?
Their athletic abilities.
Right. And it's a brilliant effect, right? Yeah. All right, so we'll go to Jeff.
Consummate, make a marriage or relationship complete by intercourse.
Say that again, just completing, is that what you said?
Yeah, complete. And then I said they did not consummate until they were married.
Yeah, you can consummate anything. It's just complete. Consummate your 12 years at college. I mean, in school. That would be completing something. So that's kind of the gem. Penurious or penury does mean extreme poverty. But it also suggests just make sure you have that. None of you did apparently. Penury, extreme poverty, bordering on miserliness. So it can mean penurious can mean you're stingy. But it's also just extremely poor. We'll go to Art.
Retinue, a group of advisors, assistants with others, accompanied by an important person.
Right, entourage. You've heard that word, haven't you? So retinue is like an entourage. Did you have a sentence?
The singer had a safe retinue.
Okay. Brian, you don't have it, right? We'll go to, yes.
So, the 11, you said it was Pennius?
Penury is the word. I don't remember what number. Mine's in a different order.
Yeah, that's 11.
Penury.
On the paper it says pecuniary. As a C.
Oh, well, that does mean what you said. I have penury. So which is it? What do you have? Well, let's do the one you have. So I'll change that. What is it? Pecuniary? All right, well, you were right about that. I was right, but I had the wrong word, so we'll go with yours. Lillian, are we?
Are we on
I'm not sure which one we're on, but,
To deprive of strength or vigor or to weaken.
yeah.
Emasculated. And I said the Force emasculated the Jedi.
All right, very good. Jameson.
Are we on sojourn or sojourn?
So again, I don't know which one we're on.
I have a temporary stay or visit.
Right, Abraham was a sojourner in the promised land, he wasn't a resident there, how'd you use
In
it?
my sentence, I said due to the wildfires, they were sojourners of the East Coast.
Okay, yeah,
Back to this artificially created or developed,
yes,
and I said, a lot of foods are fictitiously created.
yeah, somebody, before I read Walden, I really never heard that word, so I like it, because it's artificial. Ben,
Dilettantism,
okay,
a person with an interest in arts.
yeah, often it's a person with, a superficial interest, is that what you have? Try to keep it on, I know you can't make faces with it. Gotta work on that. Is it, did it say artificial or?
Maybe. I might just
Superficial?
not put that in.
That's not what you have.
Not spontaneous or natural.
Right.
Spontaneous.
Yeah, not spontaneous, and that is the same word,
Yeah.
okay. So it is an interest in art, but it's more like a superficial or, artificial one. That's the last one, isn't it? All right, so-
19.
Picturesque.
Oh, okay, picturesque, what is it?
That is visually attractive. Yeah, visually attractive.
Yeah, pretty as a picture, you know, it's picturesque, you could, paint a picture of that. All right, so I have not looked on the calendar, we're gonna have 2 tests within the next week and a half. One will be this is a quiz, and one will be, Frankenstein, because we will finish Frankenstein. And guys, it really would help if, I know, sorry not to entertain each other, but, it would really help if you really focus. Really, that will work. So we need a quiz, and we need a Frankenstein test. I'm glad we're at this point, because as I've told you, second quarter is really hard to get tests and quizzes in. Particularly this year when we have tests, right, we were talking about it yesterday, the exam is right before Christmas. I haven't looked at the schedule, but there's a whole week of it coming up, and so, that won't be any new material. All right. So if you will get out your book, yes.
Those second quarters would be really short.
It's gonna be shorter, I mean, it's the same number of weeks, but it's not the same number of weeks for new material, the exams take up a whole week. So that's always the case with second and fourth quarter. Jack, why don't you do, maybe we can distract him, I don't know, it's impossible to stop him, we'll try to distract him. Okay.
I left my book at my house.
Okay, well, you can use these. It would help if you paid attention, 11th grade, freshman year. Yeah, I just haven't given us the date for it. We are gonna have a quiz, no, not on this. This is not a quiz. All right, so let's just go through these. Some of these we've already done, we did them the other day, and, I think and I still have quizzes to get back to you. I'll get them to you. Put them down somewhere. A lot of you got it, but they were pretty good. Most of you did pretty well on it. I'll get them to you. So let's go through these. Some of them are review, so we'll just do that. Why don't we start with paint? Where does number
Where
one?
does, Victor Frankenstein traveled to start the process? At first he went to England, right?
Right.
And then he left to go, well, he left Henry and, anyway, England.
Well, that's right, but you're right too when you say at first, where did he go from there?
I can't remember the exact name, but it's those northernmost islands.
Yes,
just
I
off
think
of
the
Scotland.
Orkney Islands, which is part of Great Britain, but it's a different country, Scotland. So that's where he actually, an island makes the creature. Again, you didn't see any of this in the movie, if you ever saw a movie, and you'll probably, if you haven't seen one, I bet you'll see one between now and Halloween. And who goes with Victor? There were two answers that you gave me on the quiz, and I gave you credit for them.
Nobody.
Well, if you said the creature, that would have been accept. If you said nobody, that's possible. If you said Henry Clerval, that's possible, because the question is so broad. Clerval goes with him to England, but not all the way to the islands, but the monster does. So you could, any of those three answers, it depends on how I worded it, I've had to accept because they're all true. Emma, of course, what's he constantly worried about? Well, you probably could, if you thought about it a second, you probably could figure out what has been his constant worry since the day he created the creature.
Death.
Yeah, the creature's in it, yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't it be also that, like, his family isn't safe?
Exactly, that's specifically the fear, is that his family, he's really not so much worried about his own life, but he's very worried about theirs. Yeah, what is the location like, Jeff, number 4?
I think he makes like a makeshift lab, in a hut or something.
Yeah, on that island where very few people live, it's an ideal place to do this. And so the weather is terrible and it's not like to do there, partly. Number 5.
So he like sees the creature, and then he starts things like worrying, and then he destroys them.
Yeah, well, explain that, you're right, that answers the question, but why was seeing the creature the last straw? Why do you think,
Because he remembered like what he did.
right, Jeff?
It like emphasized, his like, the creature's smile and how horrified he was by,
Right.
like, his ugliness.
And what is he worried about? I mean, on the one hand, just make another creature, he did it once and he about finished, why is he worried about making a second one? Partly?
Because like, if there's 2 of them, then they like come together and destroy things.
And make more monsters.
Right, I mean, that's the part that I thought was absurd. Can you imagine, as I mentioned, the creativity involved in that, something only God can do. But apparently that was a possibility. So all those things are dangerous. Where does he, this is the part you read for today. Brian, where does Victor bury the creature?
In the sea?
Yes, he does. And that gets him, even that gets him in trouble. So what danger does Victor experience while on the ocean, Lily?
Is it that he wants to kill himself? Is that the picture?
Not this time. What was it, Julian?
It was like, while he was on his boat, like the storm came in.
That's right. And this happened in, she wrote the book in 1818. It was published in 1818. Her husband dies in 1822. So 4 years after writing this book, in which the main character is on a boat in the storm, he was worried he would survive. Her husband, Percy Shelley, dies in a storm on a lake with a friend, they drowned. So I just thought it was eerily like what actually will happen. I was just going back through and looking at all of her son's name was William, one of them, and he dies in infancy. And of course, she works that into the book with the character William. She lost her father and mother. She lost her husband. She lost all of her children. She herself becomes sick and almost dies. You think you've had a bad day. That's, I don't know if they're believers, but all of those things happen to her. I just thought that was interesting. Of course, it gets worse, Jameson. Not only, he's actually feeling better, right? He gets rid of the remains of the monster. As soon as he gets to the shore, what happens to him?
People say that that they witnessed him, killing Henry.
Yeah, and it was Henry. He didn't know it at the time, but he was accused of murder because of the circumstances. Who does that remind you of in the story? Somebody's accused of murder simply because of circumstantial evidence.
Justine.
Remember Justine? She just happened to be near the site of the death, which is true with Frankenstein. Just happened to be there. And what happens to it? Judy?
He is later taken in, and put on trial, but he's released.
Right.
It was just circumstantial.
Right, they had no evidence tying him to it, which is again ironic because he did kill his friend, didn't he? In what way did he kill his friend? He knows that.
He created the thing.
Right. Anyway, at this point, I had a couple of questions. Well, let's finish them all, and I'll go back to those questions. We'll answer them. How about Ben? Who encourages him in jail? Visits and encourages him.
His father.
Right. And of course, who does he end up marrying?
Elizabeth.
Yeah. And what's the specific threat? We're going to read that in just a minute. Jackson, what's the threat that he has now?
Is it like what the creature's gonna do now?
Yeah, he tells him what he's going to do essentially. What was
Oh,
that?
yeah. He ain't gonna like try to kill off Elizabeth.
Yes. How does he put it?
Well, he says, I'll see you on your wedding day, so what he thinks is that the monster is gonna kill him,
Right.
but then he keeps alluding to that it's not that, it's worse.
Yes. Literally be on the wedding night is where it'll be. So, two questions. Turn to page 166. Look at the bottom of 166. I had a couple of questions here. Well, how about halfway down? This is the monster after Frankenstein destroys the bride of Frankenstein, which has been a movie. He says about halfway down, slave. You see what that is? 166. Slave. This is the creature talking to Frankenstein. Slave, I before reasoned with you, but you have proved yourself unworthy of my condescension. Condescension, isn't that interesting? He's condescending to reason. You know what that means? What does it mean to condescend? Yeah, you're looking down on someone, and so the creature is saying that to the creator. When does that ever happen? When has a creature ever looked at his creator and sort of tried to run the show?
People, all the time.
Isn't that something, how we do that? And he's looking at his creator and calling him the slave, and he's saying, I'm the one condescending. Remember that I have power. You believe yourself miserable, but I can make you so wretched that the light of day will be hateful to you. You are my creator, but I'm your master. Yeah, I just think that, I don't know if she intended that. I just think that's so eerily like us. You know, we think we're in charge of God. Okay, God, this is how I want you to handle it. That's what we call prayer. And believe me, I've been guilty. We tell, okay, God, this is how I want to handle this situation. I want you to do this, this, and this, in this order, and, with this time schedule. And then when it doesn't happen, we wonder why God didn't hear my prayer, and why isn't God answering my prayer? You know, maybe we need to examine our prayer and our attitude. I know I've had to. How many times I've told God exactly how to do something. You know, do this tonight, you know? And maybe sometimes it's happened that way because it was a good prayer, but I just thought that was really so typical. And then the last paragraph. The monster saw, read with me, I'll read out loud, but the monster saw my determination in my face, and I gnashed his teeth in the impotence of anger. Shall each man, cried he, find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone? I had feelings of affection, and they were requited by detestation and scorn. Man, you may hate, but beware, your hour will pass in dread and misery, and soon the boat will fall which must ravish you from your happiness forever. Are you to be happy while I grovel in intensity of my wretchedness? You can blast my other passions, but revenge remains. Notice what he says here. He says, why do you get to be happy when I'm not happy? And that makes a lot of sense. It was almost as if he was telling Frankenstein, which he did tell Frankenstein, find me a bride, find me a wife. And of course he tears it up. My question was, Frankenstein, what are some of the things Frankenstein, if he could go back, he created this creature, what are some of the things that the creator is responsible for? If he creates something, what must he be responsible for after that? Pretty much everything they do. They don't know anything, so they have the creator has to teach the creation how to do pretty much everything. And in his case, think of the things he had to learn on his own. Had to learn to talk, had to learn to take care of himself, had to learn, you know, how to defend himself. All these are things that Frankenstein should have taught the creature. And this is a question you can answer if you want to. People have no parents, unless you've been one. You have no idea what is responsible. We are parents of people that are in their 40s. And you never stop being a parent. Now, you're not the same role as your parents have with you. Our children don't live with us. They have their own families. They have their own work. They have their own lives. But in a sense, you never stop being a parent. You have to parent differently. But we had no idea when God blessed us with children, the responsibilities that came with it. And it's something I don't think a lot of people think about before they make that decision. The responsibilities the creator, although we're not the creator, we kind of play that role as a parent, but we not only are that, but we must maintain the child, we must take care of the child, we must teach the child. And people don't really understand all the and it never ends. You're always going to be a parent. You can be 90 years old. Our 90-year-old father-in-law is living with him. He has a daughter, he has a grandson, and he has great-grandsons. He has 2 grandsons and 3 great-grandsons. So he's been blessed to live to see the fourth generation from him. He's been blessed to live, but he's still a father. You know, it never ends. I just think that's another thing about the book I really like. So we're on page 192, and we're going to finish it. So I'm going to ask, why don't we start with Julian, and you can read a page or half a page or whatever. Let's put this away, and we can focus our attention on Walden. We won't finish it today, but we can get started. There's only one more assignment here, and that's to read the 220. So we'll read what we can today, and I'll assign it for next week.
It was 8 o'clock when we landed. We walked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitory light, and then retired to the inn, contemplated the lovely scene of waters, woods, and mountains, so obscured in darkness, yet still displaying their black outlines.
This is literally their wedding night. They've gotten married, nothing's happened yet, no danger, no, and you can keep reading.
The wind which had fallen in the south now rose with great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summit in the heavens and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it, swifter than flight of a vulture and thin and rain, while the lake reflected the scene of the busy heavens, rendered still busier by the restless waves that were beginning to rise. Suddenly the heavy storm of rain descended. I had been calm during the day, but soon at night, through the shape of objects, 1,000 fears arose in my mind. I was anxious and watchful while my right hand grabbed a pistol which was pinned in my bosom. Every sound terrified me, but I resolved that I would sell my life dearly, and not shrink from the conflict until my own life or that of my adversary was extinguished. Elizabeth observed my agitation for some time in timid and fearful silence, but there was something in my glance which communicated terror to her. And trembling, she asked, "What is it that agitates you, my dear Victor? What is it you fear?" "Oh, peace, peace, my love," replied I. "This night and all will be safe, but this night is dreadful, very dreadful." I passed an hour in this state of mind when suddenly I reflected how fearful the combat which I momentarily expected would be to my wife, and I earnestly entreated her to retire, resolving not to join her until I had obtained some knowledge as to the situation of my enemy. She left me, and I continued some time walking up and down the passages of the house, and inspecting every corner that might afford a retreat to my adversary, but I discovered no trace of him, and was beginning to conjecture that some fortunate chance had intervened to prevent the execution of his menaces, when suddenly I heard a shrill and dreadful scream. It came from the room right into which Elizabeth had retired. As I heard it, the whole truth rushed into my mind. My arms dropped, the motion of every muscle and fiber was suspended. I could feel the blood trickling into my veins and tingling in the extremities of my limbs. This state lasted but for an instant. The scream was repeated, and I rushed into the room.
Where did he make his mistake? Yeah, he knows the monster's coming.
Leaving.
Have you seen that commercial? I don't know what it is, but it has the 4 teenagers, and they always make bad decisions. It's like Geico commercial. I mean, this is one of those. You're gonna send her upstairs alone. I mean, if you and I were in this situation, wouldn't you be tempted, not literally to leave her side, but he does, so he pays for it. Jameson.
Great God, what time that then expire? Why am I here to relate the destruction of the best hope and the purest creature of earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down, and her pale and distorted features half covered by her hair. Everywhere I turned, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form flung by the murderer on its bridal bier. Could I behold this and live? Alas, life is obstinate and clings closest where it is most needed. For a moment only did I lose recollection. I fell senseless on the ground. When I recovered, I found myself surrounded by the people of the inn. Their countenances expressed a breathless terror, but the horror of others appeared only as a mockery, a shadow of the feelings that oppressed me. I escaped from them to the room where lay the body of Elizabeth, my love, my wife, so lately living, so dear, so worthy. She had been moved from the posture in which I had first beheld her, and now, as she lay, her head upon her arm, and a handkerchief thrown across her face and neck, I might have supposed her asleep. I rushed towards her and embraced her with ardor, but the deadly languor and coldness of the limbs told me that I now held in my arms had ceased to be Elizabeth whom I had loved and cherished. The murderous mask of the fiend's grasp was on her neck, and the breath had ceased to issue from her lips. While I still hung over her in the agony of despair, I happened to look up. The windows of the room had been darkened, and I felt a kind of panic on seeing the pale yellow light of the moon illuminate the chamber. The shutters had been thrown back, and with a sensation of horror not to be described, I saw at the open window a figure the most hideous and abhorred. The grin was on the face of the monster. He seemed to jeer as with a fiendish finger he pointed towards the corpse of my wife. I rushed towards the window and drawing a pistol from my bosom, fired, and he eluded me, leaping from his station and running with the swiftness of the lightning, plunging the lake.
The other thing about this book that, again, surprises me from the movies that you see is how the creature really is sort of a super person. he can run fast, he's of course strong, you expected that, but remember how the picture of Frankenstein is in the movie? He's stiff, he has these big boots on, he kind of walks like a mummy. This is a lot more interesting. He's very fast, not slow. Lillian.
The report of the pistol brought a crowd into the room. I pointed to the spot where he had disappeared and followed the track of clothes. Nets were cast, but in vain. After passing several hours, we returned hopeless, most of the companions believing it to have been a form conjured up by my fancy. After having landed, they proceeded to search the country, parties going in different directions among the woods and vines. I attempted to accompany them and proceeded a short distance from the house, but my head whirled around. My steps were like those of a drunken man. I fell at last in a state of utter exhaustion. A film covered my eyes and my skin was parched with the heat of a fever. In this state, I was carried back and placed on a bed, hardly conscious of what had happened. My eyes wandered around the room as if to seek something that I had lost. After an interval, I arose and, if by instinct, crawled into the room where the corpse of my beloved lay. There were women weeping around. I hung over it and joined my sad tears to theirs. All this time, no distinct idea presented itself to my mind, but my thoughts rambled to various subjects, reflecting confusedly on my misfortunes and their cause. I was bewildered in a cloud of wonder and horror. The death of William, the execution of Justine, the murder of Clerval, and lastly of my wife. Even at that moment, I knew not that my only remaining friends were safe from the malignity of the fiend. My father even now might be writhing under his grasp, and Ernest might be dead at his feet. This idea made me shudder and recalled me to action. I started up and resolved to return to Geneva with all possible speed.
Also, another theme you might want to jot down is this idea of reaping and sowing. He's getting exactly what he deserved, in a sense. He created this thing, he ignored it, and it's coming back to haunt him. It's justice, even though we kind of pull for the Frankenstein and not the monster. Right.
There were no horses to be procured, and I must return by the lake, but the wind was unfavorable and the rain fell in torrents. However, it was hardly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I hired men to row and took an oar myself, for I always experienced relief from mental torment and bodily exercise. But the overflowing misery I now felt and the excess of agitation that I endured rendered me incapable of any exertion. I threw down the oar and, leaning my head upon my hands, gave way to every gloomy idea that arose. If I looked up, I saw the scenes which were familiar to me in my happier time, and which I had contemplated but the day before in the company of her, who was now but a shadow in the recollection. Tears streamed from my eyes. The rain had ceased for a moment, and I saw the fish play in the water, as they had done a few hours before. They had then been observed by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. The sun might shine or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as it had done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature had ever been so miserable as I was. So frightful an event is single in the history of man. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Mine has been a tale of horrors. I have reached their acme, and what I must now relate can but be tedious to you.
Who's the you that he's talking to? Who is he talking to? And who's talking? Have you forgotten who's?
Frankenstein's talking to the guy on the boat. What was his name?
Yeah, anybody remember his name? It's Walton. And so this is a reminder, because the whole story, we've forgotten what the context was. Now he reminds us. You want to keep reading or pass it?
I guess I'll pass it.
I arrived at Geneva. My father and Ernest yet lived, but the former sunk under the tidings when at war. I see him now, excellent and vulnerable old man. His eyes wandered in vacancy, for they had lost their charm and their delight. His Elizabeth, his more than daughter, whom he doted on with all that affection which a man feels, who in the decline of life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to those that remain. Cursed be the fiend that brought misery on his gray hairs, and doomed him to waste and wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors that were accumulated around him. The springs of existence suddenly gave way. He was unable to rise from his bed, and in a few days he died in my arms.
All right, so have you lost count? William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth, and now the father, all die as a result of the monster. You want to keep reading or pass it?
Pass it.
Yep. All right, Ben?
What then became of me? I know not. I lost sensation, and chains and darkness were the only objects that pressed upon me. Sometimes indeed I dreamt that I wandered in flowery meadows and pleasant vales with the friends of my youth, but I awoke and found myself in a dungeon. Melancholy followed by degrees that gave me clear conception of what is the reason for creation, and was then released from my prison. The way called me mad, and during many months, as I understood a solitary cell had been my habitation. Should I keep reading?
Either that, or you can pass it on to Tucker.
Okay, get it.
Liberty, however, had been a useless gift to me had I not, as I awakened to be. At the same time, awakened to revenge. As the memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on their cause. The monster whom I had created, the miserable demon whom I had sent abroad into the world for my destruction. I was possessed by a maddening rage in my thought. He desired and ardently prayed that I might have him in my grasp to wreak a great and signal revenge on his cursed head. Nor did my hate long provide itself to useless wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for this purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in the town and told him that I had an accusation to make, that I knew the destroyer of my family, and that I required him to exert his whole authority for the apprehension of this murder.
The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness. He assured sir, said he, no pains or exertions on my part shall be spared to discover the villain. Thank you, I replied. Listen, therefore, to the deposition that I have to make. It is indeed a tale so strange that I should fear you would not cut it in, were there not something in truth which, however wonderful, forces conviction. The story is too connected to be mistaken for true. I have no motive for falsehood. My manner, as thus I addressed him, was impressive but calm. I had formed in my own heart the resolution to pursue the destroyer of death, or to death. And this purpose quieted my agony, and for an interval reconciled me to life. I now related my history briefly, but with firmness and precision, marking the days with accuracy, and never deviating into incentive or
So what's he done now for the first time in the book?
Calm down.
Well, yes, what else has he done?
Tell somebody about the monster.
Right, he tells somebody about the monster. Now, at this point, it was completely his secret, he and the monster. Want to keep reading or pass it?
Magistrate appeared at first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued, he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror, and at others a lively surprise, unmingled with disbelief, was painted on his countenance. When I concluded my narration, I said, This is the being of whom I accuse, and for whose seizure and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as a magistrate, and I believe and hope that your feelings as a man will not revolt from the execution of those functions on this occasion.
This address caused a considerable change in the physiognomy
Yeah.
of my own auditor. He had heard my story with that half-kind of belief that was given to the tale of spirits and supernatural things. So when he was called upon to act officially, in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. He, however, answered loudly, I would willingly afford you every aid in your pursuit of the creature of whom you speak appears to have powers which would put all my
Exertion.
exertions to defiance. You can follow
As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrate was intimidated. Okay, how did the magistrate respond to his story? Yeah, but he actually believes him. But then when he was told by Frankenstein, you got to do something about it, what is the chief? He does come up with a reasonable response. Why should he not? Why is that really going to be hard to do, to find and kill this monster?
Supernatural almost.
Yeah, I mean, if he recognized that if your story is true, this guy has powers we don't. Don't leave yet. Let me finish the page. As I spoke, rage spoke. You are mistaken. I will exert myself. And if it is in my power to seize the monster, be assured that I shall suffer punishment proportionate to his crime. But I fear, from what you have yourself described to be his property, this is the magistrate talking, that this will prove impracticable. And thus, while every proper measure is pursued, you should make up your own mind to disappointment. That cannot be, but all that I can say will be of little avail. My revenge is of no moment to you. Yet, while I allow it to be a vice, I confess that it is the devouring and only passion of my soul. My rage is unspeakable when I reflect that the murderer whom I have turned loose upon society still exists. You refuse by just demand. I have but one resource, and I devote myself either in life or death to his destruction. I trembled with excess of agitation as I said this. There was a frenzy in my manner, and something, I doubt not, of that haughty fierceness which the martyrs of old age are said to have possessed. But to a Genevan magistrate whose mind was occupied by far other ideas than those of devotion and heroism, this elevation of mind had much the appearance of madness. He endeavored to soothe me as a nurse does a child, and reverted to my tale as the effect of delirium. Man, I cried, how ignorant art thou in thy pride of wisdom. Cease. You do not know what it is you say. I broke from the house, angry and disturbed, and retired to meditate on some other mode of action. So, we know how the story, well, we don't know how it ends, but we know where it goes next. Where's the only other place it could go? Eventually, the North Pole. There is a section here which I'm going to ask you to read for next week, 220. I'm going to ask you to read it for Wednesday. Not to do it Monday, but do it for Wednesday. There will be a quiz, and let me get these last quizzes out. Don't go anywhere. So we're going to do this finish the book for next Wednesday.